Hi, hello, sorry for the no uploads for so long. I figured I'd just make this supplementary content, just to tide you guys over. Just to be clear, I am planning on getting content out before the end of the month still. I really want to get back into doing Season 4 stuff. I actually want to start making GOMO'S stuff again, so I just wanted to make that clear. But otherwise, here are my thoughts. To preface, I want to keep things as kind of off the cuff as possible. I do have a lot written down, and I do want to sort of make a proper review sometime soon, so that'll definitely be a thing, and I'll save most of my detailed thoughts for that. But as for what I thought of this thing, oh boy. I just came back from seeing this thing last night, and it was really good. I really liked this thing. There was a lot about it that was, like, a little clunky. There was some pacing stuff which I thought was weird. I think the way that things are established in the beginning felt maybe a little rushed for people who didn't know stuff about the franchise before. So, you know, not me, but for other people, it might have been an issue. A little bit of the writing was a little weak sometimes, but overall, as an overall package, I really thought it was like a love letter to FNAF fans, and as someone who's been waiting for this thing since 2015, I really honestly think it delivered. I'm not going to go into spoilers or anything. I want to make that clear. But Jesus Christ, there is a lot about this movie that I really appreciate. Like the story, for example, which is probably the most important thing, I think, was to get right in a fucking Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And I honestly think that the story and the way it kind of was executed was kind of perfect. I think everything came together really nicely at the end. It felt very satisfying to have sort of like Mike's kind of whole thing with like the current sort of, I guess in the movie, present day. It's the year 2000, you get it. Kind of having all that sort of intermingle and make sense over time was a very satisfying, like, feeling. And obviously there's the whole novelty of like, oh shit, it's a fucking Five Nights at Freddy's movie. But like, even after getting past that, like, there was just genuine enjoyment I was getting out of it, even when they weren't at the pizzeria, even when it was just other stuff. Like, there was some good humor in there. There are a few good lines that actually kind of got a chuckle at me. Like they'll have random sort of throwaway gags sometimes. Like, there's this one, I won't spoil who it is, but there's just this one guy who's just kind of there. Like, he doesn't do much. He's just kind of funny for no reason. And speaking of that, like, it is a very specifically toned movie. It does do its very best to kind of like toe the line between being this kind of it's not really a slasher, but it's kind of like, it does try to toe the line between being this kind of creepier, more horror-focused sort of thing, while also kind of bringing it back and being lighthearted, and not being afraid to kind of embrace its goofiness somehow, like the fucking cupcake, which is probably like the least grounded part of the fucking movie. Just Chica's cupcake existing and moving around on its own, but you know what, it's fine. Like, of course, not all of it lands. Like, there is some kind of just whatever humor in there sometimes. But I think it really does try to bring out sort of everything in the franchise tonally. It brings out like the atmosphere and the creepiness of FNAF 1 and like those earlier games, and it tries to bring in sort of like the more lighthearted humor shit from like, you know, the more modern stuff like security regions, dislocation, whatever. And like, it is a bit jarring sometimes. There's a scene in the middle of the movie, which I won't spoil, which kind of feels like it just suddenly goes very tonally off track. Like, something's happening and the tone is there and the tone is sort of set, and then it kind of gradually, not even gradually, but it kind of quickly kind of becomes, oh, so we're doing this now? And it's kind of like, I kind of hope this isn't the way the movie stays for the, you know, for the rest of it. But then once that scene's over, it kind of slowly settles in why that was happening, and then it becomes more of a thing of like, oh, that was a setup for this. And so it kind of returns back to sort of that, you know, the tone you're expecting from a movie like this. And there's a whole story reason, and it does make sense in the context of the movie. And honestly, it's something that I feel like if I went and rewatched the movie, which I'm planning on doing, like when I go rewatch this thing with that context in mind, I feel like I'm gonna enjoy it more knowing that. But I think that was just kind of more of a general sort of pacing, maybe sort of tonal issue. I don't know. It's weird. It's definitely not like a perfect movie from, you know, from like, I guess, like a cinema standard. It's not a perfect movie. There are flaws to it. And like briefly going back on that tone thing, it like trying to toe the line between that, I think it does kind of get caught up because at least in the UK, it's rated a 15. So like you still want those kind of more lighthearted sort of moments, but you also want to, you know, ground it in the fact that it is a horror movie. And sometimes I feel like it just wasn't like communicated the best way. But like that aside, I think overall, as an overall package, it felt really good to watch. And the acting was like surprisingly good. I was like, Mike is kind of like, because like Mike isn't like, he's a character in FNAF 1, but he's not really like a character, but he is like surprisingly fleshed out as like some like a proper character. He is this kind of disgruntled, sort of, you know, depressed, sort of traumatized guy just trying to get by, and it's like he really is grounded in a way that does feel like, oh shit, this is somebody I want to root for. So yeah, Josh Hutcherson was great, and like pretty much like across the board, a lot of the acting was like pretty good. Better than I thought it would be. There is like kind of like some iffy acting in areas, but it was never enough to kind of take me out of it, especially with the movie kind of having a sort of a B-grade feel to it, even if it is like a fully Hollywood thing. I don't know, it definitely had an air of cheesiness to it, but I feel like that is very FNAF. Like it never goes like full horror, and I don't think it needs to. I feel like, honestly, it could have been pushed a little more in this movie, the horror element, but that isn't like a huge complaint. It's like it's still more than what you get in the games. This is definitely like the most sort of like gore and like realistic whatever we've like had in anything official. But like there were some like good scenes, like even if it wasn't all like gore and whatever, which, you know, FNAF doesn't need to be. A lot of it's implied. Like if you like the implied gore, implied sort of whatever from the games, like there's plenty of that here and then some. Like it's not a fucking, it's really not like a baby, it's not a baby horror movie like I know a lot of people were worried it would be. Like there is a sense of like sort of groundedness to it all, in a sense. But like there were some actually tense moments, and like some of the jump scares kind of got me. Like not as much as I wanted them to, not as much as I hoped, but like there were some actually creepy moments. Like one or two or three maybe that like actually got me, but it was still entertaining. Like, and I still like very much enjoyed the whole like ride. It's a very strongly atmospheric movie, and it kind of leans more into the kind of psychological horror side of things a little bit. Like it brings out the horror more of like the backstory of the games without trying to spoil anything. It really kind of feels like some of its horror is actually directed from like the sort of stuff we don't see in the first game. Like a lot of the horror comes from just knowing things, you know, like things that we've kind of taken for granted as just, oh, that happens. There's a lot more detail sort of directed towards it in a sense, and from that it's like, oh, this is kind of uncomfy, but you know, in a good fucking way, because it's a horror movie. I guess I'd also argue that just a lot of it was just like cool to see. Like, if you want to see fucking Foxy doing some cool shit, some cool weird shit, like, it's there. Like, there are cool moments in this fucking movie. And also, like, the soundtrack was really good. Like, there are clear motifs, and they're really good ones, and there is just this very kind of specificness to the sound of this movie that I very much enjoyed. It's like, it's a lot of sort of like, and I guess if you want soundtrack spoilers, skip ahead, but it's not like they're not really spoilers. It's just the soundtrack. It's got this very kind of ghostly, synthy kind of thing going on. Like, this will be a weird comparison, but like, the instrumental of the first FNAF song from The Living Tombstone, it kind of hits those kind of like that orchestral stuff and the more like retro synths, like the fucking 8-bit synths and stuff, but like it's also got its own sort of like fuzziness to it. There's like guitar and that is kind of just in a select few sort of tracks in this movie. There's one, the opening track to this movie, I've literally just been listening to on repeat. It's really good, and like it kind of perfectly sort of encapsulates like the feeling, like the atmosphere of the first FNAF game. Like I listened to this and I'm like, yeah, if the FNAF movie had or has a theme song, it's this. And like the rest of the soundtrack is like it's more kind of like orchestral kind of stuff, but it works. It really honestly works. And like Jesus Christ, like the last time I gave a shit about the score to like a movie was like, I don't know, Across the Spider-Verse. And before that, it was Into the Spider-Verse. It's like, I was actually paying attention to this, and it was good, and I really didn't think that would be such an important factor to this movie, but I really do think it was. Also, the cinematography was pretty good. There are some shots in there which I very much liked. There was some very interesting decisions. It wasn't like super crazy off-the-wall cinematography or anything. A lot of the kind of like the beginning of the movie isn't super visually crazy, and I was worried it would be like that the whole way through, but it's not. It's you know, it's just like it's a good movie to look at. That's all I'll say. Also, references. So there's the references that I figured, like, you know, there'll be references to this, there'll be references to that, you know, how references to the games go and all that. There's like one or two kind of crazy references in there that in a million years I never thought would be in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, or even like acknowledged for that matter. Like there's a very specific one kind of like sort of like later into the movie. It's in the middle of the shot. You won't miss it. But what the fuck? But yeah, I don't know. There's, I guess, that's, like, the most I can really say without spoiling stuff. I think the movie came together very, very well as, like, a FNAF movie. At least if you're coming from a place, like me, where I was a huge fan of the original games, like, it very much kind of nails that and adds its own spice into it, and it is its own thing, like, because this isn't the game universe, like, it's very much its own thing. It adapts different elements from everything from FNAF 1 up until, like, fucking Security Breach. It adapts all of that in very specific and interesting ways, which, like, really, really worked, in my opinion. But like overall, I think this was like definitely one of the best ways you could have gone about like adapting FNAF 1 into like a major motion picture. And because, like, you know how brand recognition goes, like, is it actually gonna be Five Nights? Like, yes, they actually do go back 5 nights. It is Five Nights at Freddy's. And I will say that, like, there are some details that in retrospect is kind of, it's interesting that some details, like minor fucking details, nobody is gonna care except for me, but like it's interesting that some details from the first game just aren't really adapted, but like they're so minor that it really does not matter. And yeah. But yeah, across the board, I really do think that this was like, it was a fun movie, it was a good movie, especially if you are already into FNAF, which was kind of the goal. It was to appease current FNAF fans, and if anybody else came, so be it. And that's like, I honestly, like, I don't hate that at all. I think that is a very bold move, but a very interesting one, and I think it really paid off. I honestly think it really, really paid off, because I do think Five Nights at Freddy's is big enough to kind of be able to get away with that at this point. But if you're not into it, that is also completely valid. What does suck is the amount of like really shitty critic reactions. It's definitely a whole conversation, but there are like a lot of critic reviews out right now which seem to be coming from a very misguided place with some very kind of set in stone preconceptions about FNAF and what FNAF is, and going into this and getting upset that it's like too gritty and dark, or that it's not gritty and dark enough, or you know, whatever. And like I do get that, because like like I said, like the tone does get a bit fucking weird sometimes, but like as an overall package, I really, you know, like I really do think like if you are a fan of FNAF, you will like this movie. I'm pretty confident in that. Also, the trailer doesn't goddamn show everything. Like, Jesus Christ, Sonic 2, get the fuck out of here. FNAF, yeah, there is a lot to this movie that isn't shown in the trailer, and I very much appreciate that. And a lot of the way the trailers have been cut, they've been cut in a very specific way to build a narrative that isn't actually what happens, and that is a good thing. Like, it's not like misleading. Everything that, like, there's no like fake shots. Everything in those trailers are the things that happen in the movie. It's just like there's a lot more to them in a good way. There's a lot more context behind a lot of the scenes the like marketing material's been showing and shit. I'm very biased in my opinion towards this thing, of course, but I like if you're the kind of FNAF fan that I am, you will probably like this movie a lot. I think there's a lot to like about it. There's a lot of detail packed in. It's a very kind of packed movie, I think. Even if there are some like slower paced bits, once things get going, it is a very interesting watch, and there's a lot to sort of follow along with. And again, like, the story makes sense. It's coherent. It's just a very kind of entertaining thing to be able to sort of link together everything as it's kind of provided to you, and it's kind of interesting to fill in the gaps so that when some things are revealed, it's like, oh shit, that makes goddamn sense. Yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing this thing again as soon as I can. I'm rewatching this thing on digital as soon as that comes out. I really, really like this movie. I really hope it does well. I hope the sequel's better. I hope it improves in areas that I know it can, and like hopefully should. But like I'm really happy that this movie exists. I'm happy it came out the way it did. There's like a lot of little things that I think is very fair to critique them. But like just as a personal thing, it's like I don't really mind. There's enough good in this movie to sort of outweigh it. And like it's just like. All I'll say is, like, this isn't a huge slasher killer, huge like killer animatronic thing, but again, that's not what FNAF's like been about. Like, there's always a story reason behind everything that happens, and they hone in on that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. It makes those moments where that kind of thing does happen, it gives it that much more punch, and the way everything comes together at the end, it's like everything makes sense, and like it's satisfying, and it's nice. It's just fun. It's good. And now it's time for the section of things I recorded after I recorded this, because I forgot to mention them. Oops. Also, Vanessa and William were handled really, really well. Vanessa and William were handled really, really well. I thought they would have. I didn't. Okay. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but they were both handled pretty well, is what I'll say, as adaptations from, like, the games and stuff. Also, like, the practical effects were really good. Like, I wasn't as sold as I thought I would be on, like, the animatronics moving and stuff, like, the whole time in the back of my head, it was kind of like, these are guys in suits, which might have been my fault for watching a bit of the Dorka FNAF movie vlog. Oops. But yeah, like at certain points, like, the animatronics are, like, actually intimidating. I'd say, like, Freddy is definitely the most, if I had to rank them. But also, like, the FNAF animatronics were never scary because we saw them moving around. It was mostly just they're in one place and now they're closer. And, like, in that sense, like, that's pretty much how the movie usually tries to convey these guys being spooky. They don't, like, teleport, they do move and shit. Also, I don't know for sure, but I'm, like, partially certain that, some, like, actual, like, game music cues are used in the soundtrack. I'm not, like, 100% certain on that. I didn't hear anything, like, super specific, except for one certain thing, which, when you hear it, it'll be very fucking obvious what it is. And that's the thing is a bad thing. It's a very cool rendition of something we've heard in the games before, but that's, like, one specific track. I don't know how far that extends into the rest of the stuff. Most of it just seems to be original. But it's really good. The soundtrack is really good. The movie being set in the year 2000 is, like, something I really appreciate. I feel like it would be way too easy to set it in the modern day and fucking, you know, Sonic. But I feel like it kind of stays true to FNAF 1. I don't know when FNAF 1 takes place. I don't think fucking anyone knows. Like, early 90s? I don't know. But, yeah, like, it takes place in 2000s, and I like that a lot. I like that it still has, it has this kind of, sort of feeling of, like, it emanates sort of like a retro kind of aesthetic without, like, diving into, like, 80s shit when, you know, the fucking MCI happens and everything. Also, there's something near the end of the movie that I definitely called, and I will make it very obvious that I called it after the movie comes out, and it's okay to talk about spoilers. But I called it, I think a lot of other people called it too, but I called it. That's all I'll say. So yeah, I don't know, that's about as much as I can say without spoiling anything. I know I've said that for the second time now, but yeah, it's a good movie. If you like FNAF, go watch it. If you don't like FNAF, watch it and boost the ticket sales, bitch.